Light. Let there be light. Hello, guys. Hey, everybody joining. Shyly, hello. Hello, guys. Waving and waving and waving at all of you. Hello. Puppy's having a fuss. That's what that is. One drunken pirate. Love that. Kick. Hey, guys. Wow. The whole posse is here. Hi. Well, I hope everyone is still surviving the shutdown, quarantine, and the apocalypse. Time over game finish. I'm doing good. I just had dinner, so hopefully I don't burp and do stupid, inappropriate shit on this video. What'd I do with my drink? Here it is. I do not have Corona. I just had dinner. Hey, guys. Okay, so we only have an hour, and last time we cut it like super close with the end of the time. So I thought this time, and this is one that we've gone over before, but it bears going over with you guys so that you can kind of tell me how you feel about it and all that. But I do have to say, as I say in my podcasts, that we're going to be talking about David Parker Ray. He's a super bad guy. We're going to talk about some dark, evil, horrible stuff. So if you're squeamish or you don't want to hear about him, then you can certainly drop, and it's not going to hurt my feelings whatsoever, because I get it. This guy kind of makes me want to vomit. Callum Parkins, hello. So let's get started. I have my notes over here because I get kind of nervous. So, David Parker Ray, super bad guy. He was born November 6th, 1939 in Belen, New Mexico. Yes, time over game finish. I see you. We're doing a live podcast. If I have time at the end of the podcast, then I'll add you in, okay? 1939. So let's get into some history for that time. We have talked a lot about the 30s, late 30s and early 40s when it comes to World War II. We've talked a lot about it. So 1939 was the beginning of World War II. Nazi Germany attacked Poland, causing France, Australia, and the UK to declare war against them. Hitler had already the previous year began making claims on parts of Czechoslovakia. Hey guys, hi everybody. He also sent troops to Austria, and he annexed it with really no resistance from the rest of the world. People were kind of watching, but like, meh. Before he sent his troops into Poland, he built up the German Navy, and decided to take over the remaining parts of Czechoslovakia. So while Germany invaded Poland, the United States stayed neutral. You know, they just really wouldn't get involved, though they were selling arms and war materials to the UK and to France. This guy makes my stomach want to go puke. Just missed it. Who's this about? David Parker Ray. This guy makes me want to vomit too, for sure. So anyway, the United States was staying neutral. Thank you for the great history recap. You're welcome. We were selling arms and war things to the UK and to France to try to help it staying neutral. So, but the United States would join World War II after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. So that's when we joined. Also in 1939, Russia attempted to negotiate a land deal with Finland. And I have some followers from Finland. Much love to Finland. But it wasn't successful, so the Russian troops invaded Finland. All of this was to protect the Russian city of Leningrad. Hey guys that just joined, hello. So Finland was much better prepared for the harsh weather conditions and had much higher morale amongst their troops, and Russia lost a lot more troops than they had anticipated. So while that part of it was sort of a political embarrassment for Russia, they did actually gain a little bit more land. Hi, Gabby. So there was an 8.3 magnitude earthquake that hit south central Chile in 1939. Between 30,000 to 50,000 people died, making it the deadliest earthquake in Chile's history. The Spanish Civil War had begun 3 years prior. So there was like this rebel coup that took place against the elected Republicans by the military-supported nationalists. The people were divided on which side they supported. So the nationalists were supported by Italy and Germany. And remember, this was World War II. The Republicans were supported by the USSR. So at first the nationalists were able to gain control and they seized the capital of Madrid. This forced the Republican army to flee to France. There were executions, there were death squads, and anyone who showed opposition were murdered, whacked, killed. In Australia, 71 people died across Victoria in one of their worst ever bushfires, although I'm pretty sure that number was surpassed by this last Australian bushfire stuff that happened over our winter. Bless Australia. I love history refreshers. Been a while since I heard this. You're welcome. Anarchus. Sup? In the northeastern United States, so we're talking like New York and Maine and Connecticut, people that aren't from here, up there, a continuing drought was causing massive crop failures, creating hardships for the country. Italy and Germany signed the Pact of Steel, or the Pact of Friendship and Alliance. It was a military and political alliance. Pope Pius the 11th, after failing health, he died at 81 years old. He had been a pope for 17 years. But on a positive note, there were some pretty cool people that were born in 1939. We have John Cleese from Monty Python. I mean, he's iconic. He's a legend. We have Tina Turner. Love us some Tina Turner. Marvin Gaye, which if you guys know who Rufus is, who's sitting in my chair over there, that's Let's Get It On is sort of Rufus's theme song. Francis Ford Coppola, George Hamilton, Ralph Lauren, Lee Majors, Lee Harvey Oswald, Jackie Stewart. I've got a puppy messing with things off camera too. So this was the atmosphere that David Parker Ray was born to. So his parents were Cecil Ray and Nettie Opal Parker. Now, I have not really ever been able to find background information on his father other than his nickname was Jack. No. Sorry. Hello, guys. Squiddy. Hello. So anyway, his dad's nickname was Jack. He's not listed as a parent on either David or David's sister's online memorials. So that seems kind of curious, but David Parker Ray's mother, Nettie, was born in November of 1920 in San Angelo, Texas, which is kind of in central Texas. There really isn't much information about her other than her obituary, which states she was a great Christian and her faith was very important to her, and she lived her faith like every day as an example to everyone. It also stated that she loved and cared for her family and everyone that she came into contact with. So her obituary very much comes across that she was a good, sweet, kind-hearted person. It states that she had 3 children, David, who we know who David is, Peggy, and Carolyn. So we only know of 2 children that his mother Nettie had. So she must have been with someone else and had Carolyn, with someone else. Stern face saying no to the puppy. Yes, well, 3-month-old Yukon is in training. So, you know, you have to be the alpha. So David Parker Ray's parents, Cecil and Nettie, were very poor, and they were actually forced to live with Nettie's parents on a ranch where they began to raise David and his younger sister, Peggy. Are you still working on mapping out serial killer movements to find out how many of them crossed paths? Yes, I am. I have a full-time 9-to-5, so I am fitting in as much as I possibly can. But yeah, I'm still working on that. Howdy, hello. I have my notes over here to try to keep me focused. So, Cecil, David Parker Ray's dad, was kind of known to be a wanderer, bit of a loner, Dottie, a rebel. Name that movie. And he had problems with, just disappearing for extended periods of time, and then he would just kind of show back up at home. And he was an abusive alcoholic. He regularly beat his wife and children without question. If you've heard the David Parker Ray Toy Box audio tapes, you'll know how truly evil this subhuman garbage is. Pee-wee, good job. Good job. That's what that was from. Yes. I've not listened to the tapes, but I've read the transcripts. Well, I don't know if his real tapes are out, if it's just a guy reading it, but I've read the transcripts. They're bad. So his dad was a horribly abusive alcoholic, beat his wife, beat his kids, disappeared for long periods of time, would just kind of show up. Your podcasts are better than Case File. Thank you very much. So when Cecil's abuse got super bad, Nettie decided to take the children, and she moved in with one of her sisters for just kind of a short amount of time. And Cecil eventually abandoned Nettie and the children when David was only 10 years old. There's really not a lot of information about Nettie herself, but it has been said that she neglected her children, most likely having issues with alcohol herself. Now, her obituary says that she was this wonderful, giving, loving, faithful Christian. But word around the campfire is that, I mean, she could still be a good Christian. I get read to filth about my opinions on religion, but there is a lot of information saying that she had problems with alcohol and that she was very neglectful of her kids. David would later say that he and his sister were often left with their aunt, and their aunt was not maternal. He even said that she forced him, again, disclaimer, okay, that she forced him to have sex with her over the course of a few years, even making him inflict pain on her for her pleasure. So she was a bit of a incestual, sadist kind of woman. So after his parents got divorced, the decision was made to leave David and Peggy to be raised by their dad's parents, Cecil's parents, on their rural ranch in Mountainair, New Mexico. After the move, the children's lives didn't improve. Yes, the aunt was naughty. Yeah, vomit. Yeah, gross. So their grandfather's name was Ethan. Ethan was almost 70 years old when all of this was going on. And he held, he was very old-fashioned and he was very strict. And he expected his grandchildren to conform and obey and follow his every command, whether it be verbal or just an expectation, like they can't read his mind. And if there was a failure to do so, then they would be disciplined very, very harshly. Their grandmother was also described as cold and distant. Cecil, their father, occasionally visited the kids and provided young David with, get this, sadomasochistic pornography. Yep. So I keep having to move around. I'm very sorry. So he's giving his son sadomasochistic pornography. I mean, what can go wrong with that? So when David was alone, he spent time exploring the ranch. And I don't know how many acres it was. I just know that it was really big. During his wanderings, he would sometimes leave the ranch and find himself in scrap yards. Your research is top-notch. Thank you very much. He would find himself in scrap yards. He developed a keen interest in machines that he would take apart and put back together. And, you know, I've known people that love to do that. You know, you can hand them some kind of mechanic piece of whatever, and they can take it apart and put it back together. And I mean, it's working. And they can tell you exactly what they did and the names of everything. And it just sounds like the Peanuts parents to me. But he was really good at it. He showed a talent for that. Also, as a preteen, he later said he began having sexual fantasies about inflicting pain on and raping girls with inanimate objects. I don't know. This is live. I really don't. I don't know how graphic I can get without Instagram flipping out. But, you know, he was putting things where they didn't go as part of the rape process. As the years progressed, his fantasies became more violent and more twisted and sadistic and torturous. And I can't imagine, again, his father giving him sadomasochistic pornography pre-puberty. You know, it's okay. Hello from Detroit. Hi, Detroit. I've never been there, but I would like to visit it. Excuse me. The truth is hard sometimes. It is. I know. Hi, guys. This isn't something like, there's a lot of people coming in and out. And, you know, I appreciate all of you guys, but some of them didn't hear the disclaimer at the beginning. And so, like, I'm just trying to find that gray area where you guys get the gist and you get the juicy information you want without making Instagram completely freak out. So David was apparently bullied by his classmates. About 15 years old, he started keeping a journal, a very detailed and very dark journal. His first entry that was ever found was in 1955. It stated the location of a sexual encounter in a grove of trees on his grandparents' ranch. The girl was his age, and she agreed to pretend that she was being raped. Hey guys, this is a hard one, disclaimer. She also agreed to allow him to tie her legs to 2 different trees for a visual. And he molested her, and he indicated that she actually enjoyed this experience. I'm sure that's fairly debatable. Excuse me again. His second entry regarding his sexual fantasies was not consensual. Just wait till you get to learning about the Hart brothers. Them two are the true. I know, I've got them in my notes to look them up. So you do believe this was learned behavior or outside pressure that made this behavior manifest? I think that some of it could be a genetic propensity, considering his father was violently abusive and definitely into sadomasochistic pornography and whatnot. So I think that some of it could have been inherited. And then I also think some of it was a learned behavior. So I think it's a little bit nature and nurture. She may have helped him later too. Well, you know, we don't know. So his his second entry about sexual fantasies wasn't consensual. He kidnapped a girl. He took her to a small tent that he had set up out in the shadow of some trees, not far from a hiking path, where he raped and tortured her for an entire weekend. He later told his wife that he had killed her, but his journal did not actually say that he had killed her. He didn't put in his journal that he killed her. So David also started drinking heavily and using drugs as a teenager. We are talking about David Parker Ray. His childhood right now is where we're at. As a teenager, drinking heavily, doing drugs. Around this time, his sister unfortunately discovered that he had been doing sadomasochistic drawings, as well as having disturbing erotic photographs of bondage. His sister found his stash of that stuff and she was horrified. But I don't know that she, you know, told anyone or said anything. Not that I'm blaming her, because, that was her brother. It's also been stated that he was awkward towards girls in high school, and that the girls would kind of giggle at him and all of that. So outside of being shy and awkward, none of his classmates had any clue as to what he was kind of doing in his personal time, how dark and twisted his mind was becoming. During all of this, he managed to graduate high school. So that was his childhood. I'm kind of going through my notes here. So when I was doing the research for this a while back, I found a professor, Niklas Langström of the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. And he is one of the lead scientists in a study of whether or not sadomasochistic behavior is genetic or inheritable. And he said that genetic factors are largely responsible for the effect, and that environmental factors only have a minor influence. So he said, what does it say? If Michael Myers was a rapist as well as a killer, his name would be David. Yeah. So Dr. Langström from Stockholm said, quote, when I'm doing my podcast, I always do this while I'm recording. So if you hear me say quote, there's me with my air quotes. Quote, this does not imply that sons or brothers of sex offenders inevitably become offenders too. But although sex crime convictions are relatively few overall, our study shows that the family risk increase is substantial. Unquote. So he did say that there was no current evidence for a sex offender gene per se, but rather a collection of many genes that, when put in the pot, hi Mike, podcaster Mike, hello. Anyway, said that it was a collection of genes that were linked to things like impulse control, intelligence, sexual appetite, influence the risk of a person offending. That study used the records of over 22,000 men convicted of sexual offenses in Sweden between 1973 and 2009. About 40% of sexual offending risk is explained by genetic factors, and only about 2% of the risk was shown to be from environmental factors. So we're looking at a lot of nature along with a little nurture. So back into his life. Once he was out of high school, he moved to Albuquerque and worked as an auto mechanic, and he was really good at his job. He also went to bars at night. He partied it up. He seemed to go through a phase where he actually wanted like a legit normal girlfriend. He met a 17-year-old girl and they began dating, and the romance was intense, and they married after only dating a few months in April of 1959. He then joined the Army not too long after getting married, where he also worked as a mechanic there. He was stationed in Korea, but he didn't see active combat. Experts believe that he did continue his sadistic tortures of women while he was over in Korea. He was able to come home on leave a little bit early, got his wife pregnant. She gave birth to their son, David Elvin Ray, in early 1960. He had to return to duty in Korea, and while he was gone, his wife gave their infant son to the New Mexico State Department of Public Welfare because she was heavily on drugs and could not take care of their baby. And when David found out, he hightailed it back over here, and he went and he found his son, and he immediately got custody of his son back. And then he handed him over to his grandmother at first to try to help raise. He divorced that wife promptly, and then he was sent to Fort Hood, Texas. Thank you, Josie. I appreciate that. That's the sick bastard that just died, right? Not just died. It's been a bit. Thank you. I'm just super nervous but I'm trying to be entertaining with the live stuff because we're all stuck in quarantine and I'm going crazy. So I figure if I'm awkward, you guys will be forgiving. So at the end of 1961, David was on leave and in Albuquerque when he met another woman, and thank you, and they got married super fast, and then they got divorced just as fast. Then he was honorably discharged from his military service, and that's fairly rare for the people that we study. Most of them are dishonorably discharged or medically discharged, as you well know. Let's see. So he got a job in Albuquerque driving a cement truck. This is also when he began picking up his he started doing his favorite hobby of kidnapping women, raping and torturing them, again, about 2 women a year. Hi, Yukon. You guys want to see Yukon real fast? Cute puppy intermission. No. There you go. That's Yukon. Thank you, Untamed Spirit. I appreciate that. He didn't display any mental illness in the military. None that I found. Most of his situation was weird sexual stuff. So outside of maybe like drinking a lot of alcohol in front of the other guys, I don't know. I don't think so. So anyway, he was getting about... Cut doggo. Yeah, he's a baby. 3 months old, full of it, running around. I figure a puppy intermission is allowed, right? His name is Yukon. He's such a good boy. So he journaled his crimes. He was a very avid journaler. But no women seemed to have come forward during this period and no bodies were found. So either he terrified them into silence or they just never found the bodies. So in 1963, 23-year-old David Parker Ray was well practiced in kidnapping, torturing, and raping women. It is believed that by this point he had murdered at least 10 women. That's a modest number. He had also been married and divorced twice by this point and had abandoned his son, although he had raced home to get custody of his son from his wife abandoning his son. 3 years later, so he would have been 26, he met 18-year-old Glenda Dean, a single mother with a toddler. They married quickly and their daughter, Glenda Jean Ray, was born the next year, but David was just not cut out for this white picket existence. Like, he abandoned his family. He did exactly what his father did to him. He just couldn't cut it. For years, he wandered around New Mexico and Arizona. He worked odd jobs usually involving mechanics. He had a talent for it. No one that met him or knew him during this time suspected him as anything other but nice and intelligent. But at some point, he decided to go back to his wife, and she was happy to have him back. He began studying airplane mechanics. He excelled in his studies, so he was a pretty highly intelligent guy. He was offered a job in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So he packed up his family, and that's where they went. The toy box has got to be one of the 9 circles of hell. Oh, yes. If you guys, I'm sure you guys have heard this story, but if you haven't and you Google David Parker Ray, his toy box, oh, I don't want to give away too much too soon if you don't know the story, but it's pretty bad. Okay, so by all outward appearances, this was a quiet time in David's life. He was an instructor at a school in Tulsa, and he loved his job. He was good to his wife and children, or at least that was what was said. High-functioning psycho, absolutely. But, after a couple of years, under the darkness of night, he started kidnapping women, or he kidnapped a woman, and he sexually tortured her to satisfy his urges. Then he moved his family to Texas for just a short amount of time before they moved back to New Mexico. Experts believe that moving around did not keep David from murdering. According to his journals, he kept up with his about 2 girls a year pace. He drugged them and brainwashed them to forget about everything that happened. Yeah, Can't believe I was there only a couple of months after his arrest. Holy shit. The breeding spray and the dogs. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. 2 girls a year. Now, as his daughter got older, she became known as Jessie. And, you know, if you know the story, you know who Jessie is. She and her father were actually very close. And by some accounts, she was fully aware that her father had a very sadistic side to him. But, you know, there's a lot of studies, too, that talk about kids being, it's like exposure therapy. You know, they get exposed to things so much, so harshly, so young, all of their lives that... Somebody's riding a motorcycle. Do you hear that? That she just probably didn't think that it was as bad as it was. But they say that she was fully aware of how horrible her father was. He did the same to her that his father had done to him. He showed her violently sexual images. She grew to be conditioned to think that this is what sex was. She wasn't ever taught any different. David and his wife finally divorced in 1981. He was working and making very good money, and he put some money down on some land in a town called Truth and Consequences. Right next to that is an area called Elephant Butte. Kind of looks like it's spelled like butt, but it's Butte. Now, if you aren't familiar with this area, I recommend looking it up. David had access to, guys, miles and miles of abandoned land, completely void of human touch. Okay. The very small town of Truth and Consequences itself is described as a place to live if you are a bit of a misfit. And fun fact, Stephen King holds the keys to that city. Stephen King. Back when David was living there, there were a few dive bars. I'm moving my legs around because they're going to sleep. I'm sitting on the floor. There were a few dive bars, and David frequented those. He really enjoyed hanging out in dive bars. So he married again, and this wife was very much into his deviant sexual behavior. She was completely fine with him beginning to plan out and build himself sexual torture instruments. Hi, Ronnie. There's no one behind me. He would experiment on her with his sexual torture device inventions. And she would tell him what changes need to be made to make them more pleasurable or what have you. And once he was satisfied, he stored them in the home that they had on the land. Now, during all of this, his daughter Jessie was around and she knew what was going on. And for whatever reason, they got into this huge argument. And in 1986, Jessie actually called the FBI and told them what her father had been doing. You didn't look behind you. It's all good. Miles of desert to hide bodies, just like Bundy. I've been to New Mexico once, and it is vast and empty. Beautiful. But when you live in the middle where everything's carpeted with hills and trees and grass, it's a stark difference for sure. Satan says, hey, what's going on, guys? We're talking about David Parker Ray. I'm trying to get through it because I only have an hour. So his daughter basically ratted him out to the FBI and told them what her father was doing. She got into details about his sexual sadomasochistic behaviors and how he kidnapped women, and once he had had his fill torturing them, he would kill them. She even stated that if he didn't kill them, he sold them into sexual slavery across the border in Mexico. So, of course, the FBI was kind of scrambling around to figure out if her allegations were true, but there just wasn't enough evidence to do anything about it, and so the case went nowhere. David began working as a mechanic for the Park Service in New Mexico. How did none of his ex-wives not know how off the rails he was? Well, I'm sure that he demanded like some pretty strict sexual shit from most of them, I would say, but this last one was completely fine with it. she let him use his disgusting devices on her to experiment to see whether or not they were producing the effect he wanted. Yeah, he had a woman help lure other girls to his trailer. That woman was his daughter. But we're getting there. We're getting there. So he bought himself a cargo trailer. He lined it in steel. He began to refurbish it into what he called his toy box. He's the toy box killer. He placed it literally in front of his house. You Google pictures, you can see it's like a not quite as long as a box trailer that tractor trailers or semis pull. Not quite that long. Like one of those pods. Like one of those pods trailers. He then bought a gynecological exam table, binding ropes. He bought pulleys, an abundance of various sex toys, power tools, a video recorder or camcorder, as well as incorporating his very own sexual torture devices that he had invented and tested on his wife. The estimated total of his toy box, or the cost of it, was upwards of $100,000. Now, the last step seemed to be his recording a cassette tape of himself speaking to his victims, describing exactly what was about to be done to them. So he would capture women or have someone help him catch women, and they would be knocked out or whatever, drugged, and then he would tie them, strap them down to the gynecological table, and he would play a tape for them, this recording. And I believe, now you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I know some of you actually know, but it seemed like the tape was an hour long or maybe an hour and a half long of him going on and on and on about what he was fitting to do to these women. When I first heard about this guy, I felt sick and couldn't sleep at night. Yeah, it bothers me. It bothers me. Like Albert Fish, I can't redo him. Like, I'm done. That one's buried. I can't stomach it. Okay, so I'm going to read off a tiny bit of what this said. So, disclaimer. Please don't get upset. It's pretty bad. So it says, quote, "Hello there, bitch. Are you comfortable right now? I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained, gagged, probably blindfolded. You are disoriented and scared too, I would imagine. Perfectly normal under the circumstances. For a little while at least, you need to get your shit together and listen to this tape. It is very relevant to your situation. I'm going to tell you in detail why you have been kidnapped, what's going to happen to you, and how long you'll be here. I don't know the details of your capture because this tape is being created July 23rd, 1993 as a general advisory tape for future female captives. The information I'm going to give you is based on my experience dealing with captives over a period of several years. If at a future date there are any major changes in our procedures, the tape will be upgraded. Now, you are obviously here against your will. Totally helpless, don't know where you're at, don't know what's going to happen to you. You're very scared or very pissed off. I'm sure that you've already tried to get your wrists and ankles loose, and no, you can't. You're just waiting to see what's going to happen next. You probably think you're going to be raped, and you're fucking sure right about that. That's where I'm going to stop. That's where I'm going to stop. There's quite a bit more, obviously, but you guys get the idea, okay? It's transcribed. It's available on the internet. You guys can look at it. It bothers me worse than Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, it does. Oh, see, now my face is all hot just reading that. Ugh. So he sexually tortured and killed his victims using whips and chains and clamps and leg spreader bars and surgical blades and fish hooks and saws. The list is crazy long. He preyed on women for many, many years, and he had accomplices, again, including his own daughter, who, by the way, turned him into the FBI. I guess because they closed the case, she just thought, well, it must be okay, and went back. I don't get that. Jesse would find his victims in dive bars and they would drug, or she would drug their drink. She would, and sometimes her boyfriend would help too, and take the girl back to her father. At some point, he and his wife divorced, and he found himself a girlfriend by the name of Cindy Hendy, who also became an accomplice to his crimes. Yeah, it's on YouTube. It is. So now on occasion, David would actually let some of his victims go after a few days. So that kind of torture for a few days. He stated he drugged them to make them forget what happened. According to Cindy Hendy, the ones that succumbed to their injuries were dismembered and discarded, buried out in the desert, or dumped in Elephant Butte Lake, off ravines, what have you. Yeah, the tape's out there if you want to hear it. Hello, we're talking about David Parker Ray for the people that have just joined. It's yuck, so disclaimer. Ray's career in torture and murder came to an end in March of 1999. He was 59 years old. His very last victim, Cynthia Vigil, had been held captive and tortured in that toy box for 3 days. She decided to attempt to escape, so she waited for Ray to leave for work. She then was somehow able to get the keys to her chains and bindings that Cindy had left on a table by accident, Cindy Hendy being David's girlfriend. But then Cindy kind of came in and interrupted the escape attempt, and they tussled. Cynthia hit Cindy in the head with a lamp, and Cynthia unlocked her chains. She stabbed Hendy in the neck with an ice pick. This story took place in Truth and Consequences, or Elephant Butte, New Mexico. Yeah, New Mexico. Stabbed Cindy in the neck with an ice pick, and then took off out the front door and ran away. She was completely naked, save an iron slave collar and padlock chains. She managed to make it to another house where the owner let her in and let her call 911. Now, both David and Cindy, his girlfriend, were arrested just a couple of miles from his home. They stated that they abducted Cynthia to help her kick her heroin addiction. When the police looked inside the toy box, they found the torture devices and sex toys and the evidence of her struggle. And they were both arrested, charged them with 12 different criminal charges, including kidnapping and aggravated assault. As the case was investigated, more women started coming forward, telling their story of the brutal torture that they endured. So David was facing 223 years in prison, but he suffered from a heart attack before he served any of it. So with his death was the death of the case. There have been no other bodies found, no more chance for closure. Now, that's kind of the end of the story, and I wanted to tell you guys that I'd also heard that one of the agents that went in to kind of take inventory of the toy box was a female, I believe. And after she had taken the picture or did the inventory or whatever her part of it was, she actually went home and killed herself. That it was so horrible. Watching the tapes and all of that was so horrible that she literally killed herself. So that's hardcore. I researched serial killers and I have a pretty strong stomach for all of it, but I actually had a lot of trouble with this one. I didn't sleep for days. Yes, this guy's awful. I don't, none of them are good people, okay? None of them are good people. None of them. But there's some that are, like I've said before, my kind of on the top shelf. Not that I idolize them or that I think that what they did was okay. I absolutely don't. But there's top shelf ones like, I always use Ed Kemper as an example because I think that if he would have been raised by a different woman and had been under some different circumstances, he might not have done what he did. You know, Alexander Pichushkin, which was the last live podcast that I did. And sorry for those of you that were waiting for me to record it and then something happened and it didn't record. But he had a severe head injury, and it changed him. It changed his, it scarred up his prefrontal cortex, frontal lobe. So that's, but like this guy, lots of people look at some pretty sick, twisted fucking pornography and don't go on to do this stuff. And the other things that he did that I'm not going to say live on Instagram. No way. It's just the demoralizing of women, yes. You mean to tell me they were all bad? What? Ronnie. Albert Fish is another one that I can't stomach. I can't, I will revisit some people from time to time, because I like to hear stories more than once, but I'm not doing Albert Fish again. I can't. I can't. Love Ed Kemper. Same. I think he and I were raised by the same woman. So, have you heard of the Hart brothers? I've got that written down. It's on my list. I haven't forgotten. I have a big list, so it may take me some time to get to it, but I will. I think the girlfriend is out or doesn't have that much longer in prison. I think that she's out too. I'm not 100% on that, but I think she's out too. Phone call in. Oh, I'm sorry. You weren't talking to me. I'm very sorry. So yeah, you guys have any other kind of questions or anything about this? Your mom, not good. My mom, not good. At all. That's a whole nother thing too. Check it out. Okay, so that's basically the podcast. Live podcast. I hope you guys are... I'm petting Yukon's arm here. He doesn't quite know what to think about it. Yeah, David Parker Ray did say in interviews later that these women were willing participants and that his toy box was set up to give sexual pleasure that these women asked for. He's so full of shit. Did his daughter serve time also? I believe she did. Much love to you guys from UK. I love the UK. Great job. Thank you. Thank you very much. This stuff makes me nervous, but I do it just... I'm bored, and I know you guys are bored, and it's something to... Don't bite me. It's something to kind of help keep us sane during the apocalypse. I call it the apocalypse. It's not the apocalypse, but... Satan says, thank you. You are much, much, much welcome. Thank you from Brazil. It was great. Thank you from watching from Brazil. Oh, Brazil. Love it. All right, guys. Have a safe, I don't know, I guess Sunday. If you... This is my first time to watch this. I'll be back. Thank you. I hope you are. Love from Chicago. Love back to you. I will do some more then. Thanks from Wales. Ow! Love Wales. Sorry, that's the puppy. I'll do another one. I will for sure. Love you guys. Stay sane. If you have ideas, theories, just want to chat, shoot me a message. You can DM me on Instagram or leave me a comment on the YouTube channel. So far, I can still kind of keep up with all of them, but it's getting pretty tight, and I'm not complaining at all. Like, that's not a complaint whatsoever. I just super appreciate you guys. So if I don't say anything in a couple of days, just resend, try again or something. But I'm keeping up the best I can. This is a one-woman show, so...